Picture this: a massive Navy warship built of solid steel, hundreds of feet long, packed with sailors. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, it vanishes into thin air. Some say it reappeared miles away. Others say it never came back the same. The event is known as the Philadelphia Experiment, and it remains one of the most chilling and controversial mysteries in modern military history. Was it science or was it myth? Tonight, we dig deep into the story the government never wanted you to know. Welcome to HEH TV, the channel where we uncover the world's deepest secrets, forgotten conspiracies, and the untold history that still shapes our present. If you're fascinated by mysteries that blur the line between science and the impossible, make sure to subscribe and stay with us until the very end. The year was 1943. World War II was raging at full force. The Allies were desperate to gain every possible advantage against Nazi Germany. Technology was advancing rapidly, from radar to code-breaking machines, and the United States Navy was exploring bold, risky experiments. One of those alleged experiments centered around a newly commissioned destroyer escort, the USS Eldridge. This was not just another warship. According to rumors and later claims, it was at the center of a top-secret Navy test to achieve the impossible: invisibility. The idea was simple in theory, yet extraordinary in scope. By generating an intense electromagnetic field around the ship, Navy scientists hoped to bend light and radar waves around it, making the vessel effectively invisible to enemy detection. A warship that could sneak past U-boats and German aircraft undetected would change the entire course of naval warfare. But according to those who later came forward, what happened in Philadelphia Harbor was far more terrifying than simple radar invisibility. Witnesses claimed the Eldridge didn't just vanish from radar. It vanished from sight. They said the ship shimmered, surrounded by a greenish-blue haze, then blinked out of existence entirely. Some even insisted it teleported, appearing briefly in Norfolk, Virginia, hundreds of miles away, before reappearing in Philadelphia. When the ship returned, the story takes a disturbing turn. Sailors were said to be disoriented, sick, and in some cases, physically fused with the steel walls and deck of the ship. Others reportedly lost their minds. And a few, according to legend, were never seen again. This shocking story did not surface during the war itself. Instead, it emerged years later, largely due to a man named Carl Meredith Allen, also known as Carlos Allende. In 1955, Allen sent a series of strange letters to a researcher named Morris Jessup, who had published a book about UFOs and unexplained phenomena. In those letters, Allen claimed he had personally witnessed the Philadelphia experiment while serving on a merchant ship in the harbor. His descriptions were vivid, horrifying, and specific. He spoke of sailors engulfed in flames, some walking through walls, others driven insane by the bizarre forces unleashed during the experiment. Jessup, initially skeptical, became intrigued when the Office of Naval Research mysteriously showed interest in the letters. The Navy even invited Jessup to Washington to discuss them, further fueling rumors that something very real had happened. In 1955, author Morris K. Jessup had just released his book, The Case for the UFO. It was a speculative work, dealing with unidentified flying objects, advanced propulsion systems, and the possibility of hidden technologies. Jessup didn't expect much more than a niche audience of UFO enthusiasts. But then he received a package of letters. They were rambling, handwritten, and filled with strange terminology. The writer, who signed himself as Carlos Miguel Allende, or sometimes Carl Allen, claimed to have been a witness to a Navy experiment that had gone horribly wrong. The tone of the letters was both urgent and confused. Allen claimed he had seen the USS Eldridge vanish from sight while he was aboard another ship, the SS Andrew Furuseth. He described a green fog surrounding the destroyer before it disappeared completely, only to reappear moments later. But what really gripped Jessup was Allen's insistence that this wasn't a mere trick of radar. He wrote of men screaming, sailors caught halfway inside bulkheads, their bodies fused with metal as though the ship itself had swallowed them. Others were driven insane, running through the ship before vanishing entirely. Allen's letters mixed technical sounding, jargon about electromagnetic fields and relativity with bizarre claims about teleportation and invisibility. The mix of pseudoscience and horror made it difficult to dismiss outright. And at first, Jessup dismissed Allen as just another eccentric letter writer. But the story took a bizarre turn when the Office of Naval Research, ONRE, contacted Jessup directly. They had received a strange package themselves. Someone had mailed them a copy of Jessup's UFO book, only this one was heavily annotated in the margins. The notes, written in 3 different handwriting styles, described secret technologies, alien involvement in human history, and most disturbingly, direct references to the Philadelphia experiment. When Jessup examined the annotated book, he recognized the handwriting immediately. It matched the style of the letters from Carlos Allende. The Navy's interest in these documents sent shock waves through the UFO and conspiracy community. Why would the ONR, a serious military research division, take such an interest in the ramblings of a seemingly unstable man? The special Varro edition, what happened next, only fueled suspicions further. The Navy arranged for a private Texas-based company, Varro Manufacturing, to create multiple copies of Jessup's annotated book. This secret reprint became known as the Varro edition. In it, Allen's notes were preserved in detail, with all of his references to advanced physics, alien contacts, and the Philadelphia experiment intact. Only a few hundred copies were ever made, but their very existence convinced many that the government was hiding something. If the whole story was nonsense, why would the Navy bother at all? Why not ignore the letters entirely? This question remains one of the strongest arguments for believers in the Philadelphia experiment today. The death of Morris Jessup himself grew increasingly disturbed by the affair. He was pulled deeper into correspondence with Allen, whose letters became more erratic and paranoid over time. Jessup's personal life began to unravel. In 1959, only 4 years after receiving Allen's first letter, Jessup was found dead in his car from carbon monoxide poisoning. The official ruling was suicide. But in conspiracy circles, the timing raised suspicions. Why would a man so deeply involved in exposing hidden technology suddenly end his life? Was it despair, or was it something darker? Many believed he was silenced because he had gotten too close to the truth. By the early 1960s, the story of the Philadelphia experiment had taken on a life of its own. UFO magazines, fringe researchers, and conspiracy theorists spread the tale across America. Each retelling added new layers. Some claimed Albert Einstein himself had been involved in the Navy's secret research. Others suggested Nikola Tesla's unfinished experiments were the basis of the technology. For the average reader, the story was irresistible. It had all the ingredients: wartime secrecy, mad science, government cover-ups, and human tragedy. And unlike science fiction novels, this story claimed to be true. At the heart of the Philadelphia experiment legend is the idea that the Navy was attempting to make a ship invisible. This was not invisibility in the magical sense, but a scientific one. If you could bend electromagnetic waves, including radar signals and even visible light around an object, you could effectively cloak it. During the 1940s, these ideas were just beginning to emerge. Albert Einstein's unified field theory, which attempted to link electromagnetism and gravity into one grand equation, was unfinished but widely speculated upon. Conspiracy theorists argue that military scientists were secretly building experiments from these theoretical frameworks. The theory went something like this. If you could generate an intense electromagnetic field around the USS Eldridge, you could warp spacetime locally. Light would curve around the ship, making it invisible, and radar beams would pass without bouncing back. But if spacetime itself was warped too far, the ship might not just vanish from sight. It might vanish from reality. Witnesses like Carlos Allende claimed the Eldridge didn't just vanish in Philadelphia. It actually teleported to Norfolk, Virginia, nearly 200 miles away. The idea of teleportation has fascinated scientists and science fiction writers for centuries. In theory, Einstein's relativity equations do allow for the bending and folding of spacetime. But the kind of power required to move a warship and its crew through space in an instant would be astronomical. Even today, with all of our computing power and particle accelerators, teleportation remains confined to quantum particles, not entire battleships. Still, in the fevered imagination of the 1940s, fueled by Einstein's theories and Tesla's experiments with electricity, the possibility seemed almost real. One of the darkest parts of the Philadelphia experiment legend concerns the fate of the sailors aboard the Eldridge. Witnesses claimed some were driven insane by the experience, unable to cope with the disorienting effects of space-time distortion. Others, according to the story, were fused with the metal of the ship itself, their bodies half submerged into steel bulkheads. If you think about this scientifically, even as a thought experiment, it paints a terrifying picture. If matter was shifted out of alignment during teleportation and then forced back into normal space, the atoms of a human body could theoretically overlap with those of solid steel. The result would be a grotesque merging of flesh and metal. To believers, these horror stories were evidence of a real experiment gone wrong. To skeptics, they were the kind of embellishments that always appear in urban legends, designed to shock and disturb. And as the story of the Philadelphia experiment spread, scientists and researchers began to push back. Physicists pointed out that the kind of electromagnetic field required to bend light around an entire warship would be so powerful it would likely destroy the ship itself. Moreover, in 1943, radar invisibility was being pursued through much simpler methods. The Navy was experimenting with degaussing, using cables and electrical currents to reduce a ship's magnetic signature so it would not trigger magnetic mines. This was a real technology, and one that may have inspired exaggerated rumors among sailors. Historians also noted that no credible eyewitnesses ever came forward. The only detailed account was from Carlos Allende, a man with a reputation for fabrications and unstable behavior. Perhaps the strongest blow against the story came from crew members of the USS Eldridge itself. In later interviews, surviving sailors stated clearly that no such experiment had ever occurred. The Eldridge, they said, was never even docked in Philadelphia during the time the experiment supposedly took place. Naval records confirm that the ship was commissioned in New York in August 1943, conducted shakedown training in Bermuda, and was never in Philadelphia at the right time. For skeptics, This was conclusive proof that the entire story was a fabrication. Yet believers argue that government records could have been altered and crew members silenced. After all, secrecy was the Navy's specialty. If something so extraordinary had taken place, it would certainly have been buried under classified files. By the 1960s, the Philadelphia experiment had become a staple of UFO magazines, late-night radio shows, and underground conspiracy circles. A strange mix of science, horror, and government secrecy made it irresistible to a public already primed by Cold War paranoia. Writers began weaving the tale into broader theories about hidden military technologies. Some claimed the experiment had been the first step in mastering teleportation, time travel, or even interdimensional gateways. Others suggested it was connected to recovered alien technology. In 1979, author Charles Berlitz, already famous for his book on the Bermuda Triangle, co-wrote the Philadelphia experiment, Project Invisibility. Berlitz's reputation and reach gave the story its first mainstream audience. For millions of readers, this was the first time they had ever heard of the Eldridge disappearing in a cloud of green light. Berlitz's book cemented the Philadelphia experiment as a modern myth. It didn't matter that his sources were weak or that skeptics dismissed his claims. What mattered was the sense of mystery and danger an official project gone rogue, hidden away by a government that refused to tell the truth. The myth leapt from conspiracy books to movie screens in 1984 with the release of the Philadelphia Experiment, a science fiction film that dramatized the supposed events. The film depicted sailors flung through time itself, landing in the 1980s after their ship vanished in 1943. The movie was a hit with audiences. It didn't just retell the conspiracy, it expanded it, blending science fiction tropes with government secrecy and tragic human consequences. Suddenly, the Philadelphia Experiment wasn't just a fringe story. It was pop culture. Sequels, documentaries, and TV specials followed. Each retelling added new twists, from connections to alien technology to experiments at Montauk, New York, which some claimed were follow-ups to the original Eldridge test. Cold War paranoia and belief. To understand why the Philadelphia experiment struck such a nerve in America, you have to look at the cultural context. The 1950s through the 1980s were decades of deep distrust. Citizens lived under constant fear of nuclear war, government secrecy, and technological leaps that seemed both miraculous and terrifying. The idea that the Navy might have attempted an experiment so dangerous it tore holes in space and fused man into steel seemed almost believable in an era of atomic bombs and spy satellites. If the government could split atoms to level entire cities, who was to say they couldn't make a ship invisible? The experiment became a metaphor for the dangers of unchecked science. It symbolized what might happen when human curiosity collided with military ambition, without regard for the cost to ordinary people. The Montauk Connection. By the 1980s, the Philadelphia experiment had been absorbed into an even larger web of conspiracies, the Montauk Project. According to this theory, the Philadelphia experiment was only the beginning. Survivors and scientists were said to have moved on to secret bases in Montauk, Long Island, where they pursued time travel, mind control, and interdimensional research. The Montauk myth later inspired elements of the hit Netflix series Stranger Things. While the show never directly references the Philadelphia experiment, the DNA of the conspiracy, the idea of a secret government project tearing open dangerous doors, runs through it. An enduring mystery. Despite decades of debunking, the Philadelphia experiment refuses to fade away. It resurfaces every few years in documentaries, YouTube videos, and new books. People are drawn to it not because it's proven, but because it's unsolved. It lives in that gray space where skepticism and belief collide. To skeptics, it's a perfect example of how myths grow from misunderstandings, sailors seeing routine experiments, rumors passed along, and one eccentric man's letters spiraling into a global legend. To believers, it's proof that the government hides its most extraordinary discoveries. After all, if the Manhattan Project, with thousands of workers, could remain secret until the bomb was dropped, why couldn't a smaller experiment be kept hidden forever? One of the strongest skeptical explanations for the Philadelphia experiment comes from real naval technology of the 1940s, degaussing. Degaussing was a method used to protect ships from magnetic mines. By running powerful electrical cables along a ship's hull, the Navy could cancel out its magnetic field. This made the ship invisible, not to the eye, but to German mines that relied on magnetic triggers. Sailors unfamiliar with the technical process might have seen bright sparks, strange electrical discharges, or unusual lighting effects during the procedure. Over time, these sights could easily be exaggerated into stories of ships disappearing or glowing with strange auras. Skeptics argue that Carlos Allende may have witnessed a degaussing operation, or simply heard sailors discussing it, then spun it into his dramatic tale of teleportation and invisibility. Timeline problems, another critical flaw in the Philadelphia experiment story, lies in the ship's records. The USS Eldridge was never stationed in Philadelphia at the times described by Allende. Navy logs placed the ship in Bermuda and New York during that period, undergoing training and escort missions. For skeptics, this alone proves the story false. For believers, however, official records can never be trusted when a cover-up is suspected. This clash between documented history and conspiracy belief is at the core of why the Philadelphia experiment endures. The Navy's official denial over the years, the Navy has repeatedly denied that any such experiment ever took place. In fact, they state that the technology described would have been impossible in 1943 and remains impossible even today. Their official explanation is simple. The Philadelphia experiment is a myth, born from misunderstandings, hoaxes, and popular imagination. But in the world of conspiracy theories, official denial is often seen not as closure, but as confirmation. The very act of denial fuels suspicion. If there was truly nothing to hide, why keep addressing it? Why people still believe the Philadelphia experiment isn't just about a ship disappearing. It taps into something deeper in the human imagination, the fear and hope of science unchecked. On one side, it represents the horror of technology that goes too far, men fused into steel, minds broken by forces they cannot comprehend. On the other, it suggests a hidden frontier of possibilities: time travel, teleportation, bending reality itself. For Americans in particular, raised on a culture of both technological wonder and deep distrust of government, the story hits a powerful nerve. It promises that the world is stranger than we've been told, and that the truth is always just beyond reach. The broader legacy, from UFO lore to time travel theories, from the Montauk Project to Stranger Things, the Philadelphia experiment has seeped into modern culture in ways few conspiracies ever have. It stands alongside Roswell and Area 51 as one of the great unsolved legends of the 20th century. Whether real or not, it continues to inspire books, films, and endless debate online. Each new generation discovers the story and adds its own twist, keeping the mystery alive. So, Was the Philadelphia experiment real? Was the USS Eldridge torn from time and space in 1943, leaving sailors broken and fused into steel? Or was it nothing more than a sailor's tall tale, inflated by a troubled mind and spread by a public hungry for mystery? In the end, we may never know. The records are silent, the witnesses long gone, and the Navy holds firm in its denial. Yet the story endures, because it speaks to something timeless. Our fascination with the boundary between science and the impossible. Perhaps the real experiment is not what happened to the Eldridge, but what happens to us when we choose to believe or refuse to. You've just heard one of the most chilling mysteries in modern naval history. Do you think the Philadelphia experiment was fact, myth, or something in between? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into hidden history and unexplained events, subscribe to HEH TV and stay tuned, because the truth is always stranger than fiction.